I always thought Cassandra and I had the perfect mother-daughter relationship. 28 years of what I believed was unconditional love, built on sacrifice, devotion, and endless support in our cozy Victorian home overlooking Willowbrook Valley. Everyone in Rosemere Springs said we were inseparable, the mother who gave everything and the daughter who appreciated it all. Then came that Tuesday morning when Dr. Mitchell called with my test results. Advanced heart failure, possibly. Months to live. And when I shared the devastating news with Cassandra at my bedside, she looked me straight in the eye and said, "Maybe it's time to just pull the plug, Mom. You've lived your life." So I decided to pull her plug instead. Before we jump back, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. My name is Eleanor Pemberton, and at 72 years old, I thought I knew exactly who I was and where I stood in this world. I was the devoted single mother who had raised Cassandra after her father, Marcus, died in a construction accident when she was only 4 years old. I was the woman who worked double shifts at Rosemere General Hospital as a nurse for 30 years, ensuring my precious daughter never wanted for anything. I was the grandmother who had helped raise her 2 children, Sophia and Lucas, while Cassandra built her successful real estate empire in downtown Rosemere Springs. Our home on Maple Ridge Drive had been in my family for 3 generations. A stately Victorian with wraparound porches, bay windows that caught the morning light just perfectly, and a garden that had been featured in the Rosemere Springs Garden Club newsletter more times than I could count. Every room held memories of Cassandra growing up, the kitchen where we baked cookies for her school fundraisers, the living room where she practiced piano recitals, the study where I helped her with homework late into the night. I had poured everything into that house, and into her future. When Cassandra wanted to attend Pemberton University, yes, the prestigious school named after my great-grandfather who founded it, I took out a second mortgage to pay for her education. When she wanted to start her real estate business, I liquidated my retirement savings to give her the startup capital. When she bought her mansion in Willowbrook Heights, I co-signed the loan because her credit wasn't quite established enough. "Mom, you're my rock," she would tell me during our weekly Sunday dinners. "I don't know what I would do without you. You've sacrificed so much for me and the kids." Those words meant everything to me. They validated every sleepless night I'd eat dough, worked extra shifts, every vacation I'd skipped, every luxury I'd foregone to ensure her success. Cassandra had built quite a life for herself. Pemberton and Associates Real Estate had become the most successful agency in 3 counties. Her husband, James Hartford, was a prominent attorney, and together they lived in a sprawling estate with tennis courts and a pool. Their children, my grandchildren, attended the finest private schools that money could buy. Sophia, now 16, was already being recruited by Ivy League universities for her academic achievements. Lucas, 14, was the star quarterback on his prep school team. Saw them every Sunday for dinner religiously. Cassandra would bring the family over to my house. Their house was too formal for regular family meals, she claimed. And we'd gather around my grandmother's mahogany dining table. I'd spend all weekend preparing elaborate meals, their favorite dishes, making sure everything was perfect. Roast beef with Yorkshire pudding for James, honey-glazed salmon for Cassandra, chocolate chip pancakes for the kids' dessert. During these dinners, Cassandra would update me on her business dealings, her latest property acquisitions, the expensive vacations they were planning. She'd show me photos from her real estate conferences in Milan and Dubai, her charity galas where she rubbed shoulders with senators and celebrities. I'd listen with pride, marveling at how far my little girl had come from our modest beginnings. "I'm thinking of expanding into commercial real estate," she mentioned just 2 months ago, cutting into her perfectly prepared salmon. "There's this waterfront development opportunity in Harbor Bay. The initial investment is substantial, but the returns could be phenomenal." "How substantial?" I had asked, already knowing where this conversation was heading. "Around $800,000 for the down payment," she said casually, as if discussing the weather. James thinks it's too risky right now with interest rates fluctuating. But I have a feeling about this one, Mom. My instincts have never been wrong. I had nodded thoughtfully, mentally calculating how much equity remained in my house. There wasn't much left after years of supporting her ventures, but perhaps one more refinance wouldn't hurt. After all, what was money compared to my daughter's happiness and success? The truth was, I lived for those Sunday dinners, for feeling needed and appreciated. At 72, with most of my friends either deceased or in nursing homes, Cassandra and her family were my entire world. I had never remarried after Marcus died, never pursued my own dreams or interests. Every decision I made was filtered through one question: what would be best for Cassandra? My social calendar revolved entirely around her schedule. When she needed someone to watch the kids during school breaks, I canceled my plans. When she wanted to host dinner parties at my house because the ambiance was more authentic than her modern mansion, I gladly played hostess and chef. When she needed someone to drive her to medical appointments because James was too busy with his law practice, I rearranged my entire week. "You're such a blessing, Mom," she would say, hugging me goodbye after these favors. "I'm so lucky to have a mother who understands that family comes first." I believed I was blessed too. Blessed to have a daughter who still wanted to spend time with me, who valued my opinion, who trusted me with her children. Not all mothers could say their adult daughters called them multiple times a week or included them in major life decisions. The neighbors in Rosemere Springs always commented on our close relationship. "Eleanor, you're so fortunate," Mrs. Henderson from next door would say. "Cassandra is such a devoted daughter. Not many children these days make time for their elderly parents like she does." I would beam with pride at these comments, feeling validated in my choices. All those years of sacrifice had been worth it. All those nights of worry and financial strain had paid off in the most important currency of all: my daughter's love and respect. Looking back now, I can see how carefully constructed this narrative was, how I had built my entire identity around being the selfless, devoted mother who would do anything for her child. I had convinced myself that this was what love looked like: endless giving, constant availability, unwavering support regardless of the cost to myself. I never questioned why Cassandra never offered to help with my mounting medical bills from my arthritis treatments. I never wondered why she assumed I would always be available to babysit, but never offered to pay me for the service. I never considered it strange that every family gathering took place at my house, using my resources, requiring my labor. I was the perfect mother, living the perfect relationship with my successful daughter. Or so I believed, until that Tuesday morning when Dr. Mitchell's phone call changed everything, and I discovered just how conditional Cassandra's love really was. This is the story of how I lost my illusions, found my backbone, and learned that sometimes the people we love most are the ones who value us least. It's the story of what happened when I finally decided to stop giving everything and started asking for something in return. And it all began with a medical diagnosis that revealed far more than just the condition of my heart. Preparing and narrating. This story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The first warning signs came during what should have been a routine morning. I was in my garden, tending to the rose bushes that had been my pride and joy for decades, when a sharp pain shot through my chest like lightning. Not the dull ache I'd grown accustomed to from years of arthritis, but something altogether more sinister. The pruning shears slipped from my hands as I grabbed the garden gate for support, gasping for air that seemed suddenly too thin. Mrs. Henderson from next door found me 20 minutes later, still clutching the gate, my face gray and clammy with perspiration. "Eleanor, dear God, what's wrong?" she called out, hurrying across our adjoining yards with the urgency of someone who had seen enough medical emergencies to recognize one. I can't seem to catch my breath, I managed between shallow gasps. And there's this pressure in my chest, like someone's sitting on it. Without hesitation, she called 911. As we waited for the ambulance, Mrs. Henderson held my hand and kept talking to me about ordinary things, her grandson's upcoming wedding, the weather forecast, anything to keep me focused and calm. But I could see the worry in her eyes, the way she kept checking her watch and glancing toward the street. The ride to Rosemere General Hospital was a blur of sirens, medical equipment, and paramedics asking questions I struggled to answer. "Have you experienced chest pain before, ma'am? Any history of heart problems? Are you taking any medications?" I tried to focus on their questions, but the world felt distant and strange, like I was watching someone else's emergency unfold. At the hospital, they rushed me into the cardiac unit where a team of doctors and nurses swarmed around me with practiced efficiency. Dr. Rebecca Mitchell, the cardiologist on duty, introduced herself with a calm professionalism that immediately put me at ease despite the circumstances. "Mrs. Pemberton, we're going to run some tests to see what's going on with your heart," she explained, her voice steady and reassuring. "An EKG first, then blood work, and possibly an echocardiogram depending on what we find." The tests seemed to take forever, each one revealing new concerns that led to additional tests. I watched the medical staff's faces carefully, looking for clues about what they were discovering. Having spent 30 years as a nurse in this very hospital, I could read the subtle signs. The way Dr. Mitchell's eyebrows furrowed when she studied my EKG results, the hushed conversation between the cardiology residents, the additional scans they kept ordering. "Mrs. Pemberton," Dr. Mitchell said finally, pulling up a chair beside my hospital bed, "I need to discuss your test results with you. Is there someone you'd like me to call? Family member who should be here?" My heart, already struggling, seemed to skip entirely at her tone. "My daughter," I said immediately. "Cassandra Hartford. She should be here." I gave them her number, and they assured me someone would call her right away. Dr. Mitchell waited until Cassandra arrived before delivering the news. My daughter rushed into the room still wearing her expensive business suit. From showing properties, her heels clicking against the hospital's polished floors, she looked perfectly put together as always, but I could see concern in her eyes as she took in the medical equipment surrounding my bed. "What's happening, Mom?" she asked, reaching for my hand. "They said you had chest pains?" Dr. Mitchell looked between us, her expression grave. "I'm afraid the news isn't what we hoped for. Mrs. Pemberton, your test results show that you're experiencing advanced heart failure. Your ejection fraction, essentially how effectively your heart is pumping, blood, is severely compromised." The words hit like a physical blow. Advanced heart failure. I'd seen enough cardiac patients during my nursing career to understand exactly what those words meant, but hearing them applied to my own condition felt surreal. "What does that mean in terms of treatment options?" Cassandra asked, her real estate negotiator instincts kicking in immediately. "Surgery? Medication? What are we looking at here?" Dr. Mitchell pulled out a tablet, showing us images of my heart scans. "Unfortunately, Mrs. Pemberton's condition is quite advanced. We're looking at end-stage heart failure, which means the damage is irreversible. We can manage symptoms with medication and lifestyle changes, but what?" I pressed, needing to hear the complete truth. "But realistically, we're talking about palliative care at this point, keeping you comfortable and maintaining quality of life for whatever time remains. With aggressive management, some patients live for years, but others—" She trailed off, diplomatically. "How long?" Cassandra asked bluntly. "Ballpark estimate." "It's difficult to say precisely. With optimal care, potentially 6 months to 2 years. But Mrs. Pemberton's heart is severely weakened. It could be much less." The room fell silent except for the steady beeping of monitors and the distant sounds of hospital activity in the hallway. I stared at the ceiling tiles, trying to process this fundamental shift in my reality. 6 months to 2 years. After 72 years of life, of raising my daughter, of working and sacrificing and building a life, It might all end in such a short span. What about quality of life during this time? I asked, forcing myself to think practically. Will I be able to stay in my home? Take care of myself? Dr. Mitchell's expression softened with compassion. Initially, yes, with some modifications, but as the condition progresses, you'll likely need increasing levels of assistance. Many families find that home health care or assisted living becomes necessary. Assisted living, Cassandra repeated quietly, and I caught something in her tone that I couldn't quite identify. For now, let's focus on getting you stabilized and home, Dr. Mitchell continued. We'll start you on medications to help your heart function more efficiently and reduce fluid buildup. You'll need regular follow-up appointments, and we'll monitor your condition closely. After Dr. Mitchell left, Cassandra and I sat in uncomfortable silence. I watched my daughter's face, searching for signs of the devastation I was feeling, looking for shared grief or determination to fight this together. Instead, I saw something that looked almost like calculation. "Mom," she said finally, her voice oddly detached. "I need to ask you some practical questions about your finances, your will, your wishes for end-of-life care." "Cassandra, I just found out I have heart failure 20 minutes ago," I said, surprised by her immediate jump to logistics. "Can't we process the emotional impact first?" She shifted in her chair, looking uncomfortable. "Of course, Mom. It's just, well, if we're looking at a limited time frame, there are things we need to discuss. Practical arrangements that should be made while you can still make clear decisions." Something cold settled in my stomach that had nothing to do with my failing heart. "What kind of practical arrangements?" "Well, your house, for one thing. Maple Ridge Drive is prime real estate now. The market value has increased dramatically in the past few years, and your medical care is going to be expensive, Mom. Even with Medicare, end-stage heart failure treatment costs can be astronomical." I stared at her, trying to understand why she was discussing real estate values while I was still wearing a hospital gown with electrode patches stuck to my chest. "Cassandra, I'm not dead yet. I'm planning to live in my house for whatever time I have left. But Mom, be realistic. Dr. Mitchell said you'll need increasing care. Wouldn't it make more sense to sell the house while you can get top dollar for it and use that money for a really nice assisted living facility? I could handle the sale for you. No commission, of course. Family discount." The absurdity of the moment struck me like a slap. My daughter, upon learning that her mother was dying, was already planning to profit from my death by selling my family home. The home where she'd grown up, where we'd shared countless memories, where I'd planned to spend my final days. "I want to go home, Cassandra," I said quietly. "To my own home. On Maple Ridge Drive. That's where I want to spend whatever time I have left." She sighed, the sound tinged with frustration rather than understanding. "Okay, Mom. If that's what you want. But when the time comes that you can't manage anymore, we'll need to revisit this conversation. When the time comes, not if. When." That night, alone in my hospital bed, I stared at the ceiling and realized that the woman I'd raised, the daughter I'd sacrificed everything for, was already planning my exit strategy. She wasn't thinking about how to help me fight this disease or how to make my remaining time meaningful. She was thinking about real estate transactions and practical arrangements. The heart monitor beside my bed beeped steadily, counting down the moments of my newly shortened life. But it was my spirit, not my heart, that felt the most broken. Because in the space of one devastating afternoon, I had learned two life-changing truths. I was dying, and my daughter was already moving on without me. Tomorrow, I would be discharged, to begin what Dr. Mitchell diplomatically called the next phase of your journey. But tonight, in the sterile darkness of room 314, I began to suspect that the biggest shock of this medical crisis wasn't going to be my diagnosis. It was going to be discovering who my daughter really was when she thought I no longer mattered. Down. Discharge process from Rosemere General took most of the following morning, with nurses providing detailed instructions about my new medications, dietary restrictions, and warning signs to watch for. Dr. Mitchell had prescribed a cocktail of heart medications with names I couldn't pronounce: lisinopril, metoprolol, furosemide, each with their own schedule and potential side effects. The pharmacy bag felt heavy in my lap as Cassandra wheeled me toward the hospital exit. "I've arranged for a home health aide to start tomorrow," she announced as we waited for the valet to bring her car around. "Her name is Patricia, and she comes highly recommended. She'll be there 3 times a week initially to help with medications, light housekeeping, meal preparation." I looked up at her, surprised. "You arranged this without discussing it with me?" "Mom, you just heard what Dr. Mitchell said about needing assistance. I took the initiative to handle it." Her tone carried a hint of irritation, as if my question was unreasonable. "Patricia specializes in cardiac patients. She'll be perfect for monitoring your condition." The drive home felt different somehow, as if I was seeing Rosemere Springs through new eyes. The familiar streets, the shops where I'd done my weekly grocery shopping for decades, the park where I'd taken Cassandra as a child, everything looked the same. But I felt like a visitor in my own life. The knowledge of my shortened future cast a strange filter over the ordinary world. Cassandra kept up a steady stream of conversation about practical matters. "I've spoken with James about updating your will. He can handle that for you at no charge, family rate. And we should discuss your medical directives, power of attorney paperwork, all those things that people put off until it's too late." "It's not too late yet," I said quietly, watching my neighborhood pass by the window. "Dr. Mitchell said I could have months, maybe years with proper management." "Of course, Mom. But it's better to be prepared. You know what they say about failing to plan." When we arrived at my house on Maple Ridge Drive, I felt a surge of relief at seeing my rose garden, my wraparound porch, my bay windows reflecting the afternoon sun. This was home. This was where I belonged, where I intended to fight this disease and make the most of whatever time remained. Cassandra helped me inside and immediately began rearranging things. "We should move your bedroom downstairs," she said, eyeing the staircase to the second floor. "The guest room would work perfectly, and then you wouldn't have to navigate stairs when you're having breathing difficulties." "I like my bedroom upstairs," I protested. "I've slept in that room for 40 years. "But Mom, be practical. What if you have another episode and can't make it downstairs for help? What if you fall on the stairs during the night?" She was already measuring the guest room with her eyes, mentally rearranging furniture. Before I could respond, the doorbell rang. Cassandra answered it, returning with a middle-aged woman in scrubs who introduced herself as Patricia Vance, the home health aide. "Mrs. Pemberton," Patricia said warmly, "I'm here to help make this transition as smooth as possible. I've worked with many cardiac patients, and I understand how overwhelming all these changes can feel." For the next hour, Patricia assessed my home situation, while Cassandra peppered her with questions about my care requirements, medication schedules, and emergency protocols. I sat in my favorite chair, feeling oddly like a bystander in discussions about my own life. "The most important thing," Patricia explained, "is maintaining as much normalcy as possible while ensuring safety. Mrs. Pemberton, what does a typical day look like for you? What activities bring you joy?" "I love my garden," I said immediately, "and I enjoy cooking, especially for family dinners. I read mystery novels, and I volunteer at the Rosemere Springs Community Center on Thursdays." Cassandra interjected quickly. "She'll need to scale back on physical activities. The volunteering might be too much strain, and the gardening involves a lot of bending and lifting." I felt a flash of irritation. "I'm sitting right here, Cassandra. I can speak for myself about what I'm capable of doing." Patricia nodded diplomatically. "We'll take it day by day and see how Mrs. Pemberton feels. Gentle activity is actually beneficial for cardiac patients when properly managed." After Patricia left, Cassandra lingered, continuing her campaign to reorganize my life. "I've been thinking about Sunday dinners, Mom. It might be better if we moved them to our house from now on. Less stress for you, and our kitchen is more modern, easier to manage large meals." "I enjoy cooking for the family," I said firmly. "It's one of my greatest pleasures." "But Mom, you heard what the doctor said about avoiding stress and overexertion. Preparing dinner for 6 people every week is exactly the kind of strain you should avoid." I studied my daughter's face, searching for genuine concern but finding something else entirely. There was an eagerness in her expression that didn't match her words of worry. "Why do I get the feeling you've already decided this isn't up for discussion?" "I'm just trying to look out for your best interests," she said, but her tone had sharpened. "Someone has to be realistic about your limitations now." That evening, after Cassandra had finally left, I sat on my front porch swing watching the sun set, paint the sky in shades of pink and gold. Mrs. Henderson came over with a casserole, settling beside me with the comfortable familiarity of a 40-year friendship. "How are you really feeling, Eleanor?" she asked, cutting through social pleasantries with characteristic directness. "And don't give me the polite version." "Scared," I admitted. "Not just about dying, but about other things." She nodded understandingly. "Cassandra seems very concerned about practical arrangements." That's one way to put it. I found myself telling Mrs. Henderson about the rapid-fire discussions of wills, real estate values, and life reorganization. As I spoke, her expression grew increasingly troubled. "Eleanor, dear, may I ask you something rather personal? In all the years I've known you, have you ever said no to Cassandra about anything important?" The question caught me off guard. I thought back through decades of decisions, sacrifices, and accommodations. The answer was disturbing in its clarity. "No," I said slowly. "I don't think I ever have." And now, when you're at your most vulnerable, she's making an awful lot of decisions very quickly. Mrs. Henderson's voice was gentle but pointed. "Just something to think about." That night, I lay in my own bed upstairs, the bedroom Cassandra wanted me to abandon, and reflected on the past 48 hours. My diagnosis had been devastating, but my daughter's reaction had been almost more shocking. Where I had expected compassion, I'd received efficiency. Where I'd hoped for emotional support, I'd gotten logistical management. The next morning brought the first truly devastating blow. I was having breakfast when my phone rang. Dr. Mitchell's office, calling with additional test results that required immediate discussion. "Mrs. Pemberton, I need you to come in this afternoon. We've received some concerning results from your additional blood work that I'd prefer to discuss in person." My hands trembled as I called Cassandra to let her know about the appointment. She arrived within 30 minutes, her face tight with controlled anxiety. "What kind of additional results?" she demanded as we drove to the hospital. "What weren't they telling us yesterday?" Dr. Mitchell's office felt smaller this time, the walls seeming to close in as she reviewed her notes. "Mrs. Pemberton, I'm afraid the situation is more serious than we initially assessed. Your kidney function is also compromised, likely due to the advanced heart failure. This significantly impacts your overall prognosis." "How significantly?" Cassandra asked, leaning forward in her chair. "We're looking at a much shorter timeline. Weeks to months, rather than months to years. I'm so sorry to have to deliver this news." The words seemed to echo in the small room. Weeks to months. I felt the world tilt around me, my carefully constructed hopes for fighting this disease crumbling in an instant. "What are our options now?" I managed to ask. Dr. Mitchell's expression was compassionate but direct. "We focus on comfort care, pain management, preventing further deterioration, maintaining quality of life for whatever time remains. Some patients choose to explore aggressive treatments, but given the advanced nature of both the heart and kidney failure, the risks often outweigh potential benefits." I sat in stunned silence, absorbing this dramatic revision of my future. Weeks to months. Not enough time to see another Christmas. Probably not enough time to see Sophia graduate from high school or Lucas finish his sophomore year. Cassandra was asking practical questions again, about in-home hospice care, about medical equipment I might need, about timeline expectations for various stages of decline. Her voice seemed to come from very far away. As we left the doctor's office, I felt hollowed out, as if the core of my being had been scooped away. Cassandra's arm was around my shoulders, but her touch felt perfunctory rather than comforting. "Mom," she said as we reached the car, "we need to have some serious conversations now. About your wishes, about how you want to handle this." I looked at my daughter, this woman I had raised and sacrificed for and loved unconditionally, and saw something in her eyes that chilled me more than any medical diagnosis could. There was calculation there, impatience barely held in check, and something that looked almost like relief. "What kind of conversations?" I asked, though part of me already dreaded the answer. "About end-of-life decisions, Mom. About when enough is enough. About not prolonging suffering unnecessarily." The way she said it, clinical and detached, sent ice through my failing heart. Because in that moment, I realized that my daughter wasn't talking about my suffering at all. She was talking about her own. The conversation I dreaded came sooner than expected. 2 days after receiving the devastating news about my kidneys, I was sorting through old photo albums in my living room when Cassandra arrived unannounced. She found me surrounded by decades of memories, pictures of her first day of school, family vacations to Lake Serenity, her college graduation where she'd hugged me so tightly and whispered, "I couldn't have done this without you, Mom." "What are you doing?" she asked, her tone sharper than usual as she surveyed the scattered photographs. "Looking through memories," I said simply, trying to decide which photos the grandchildren might want someday. She sat down across from me, but instead of joining in the nostalgic activity, she swept several albums aside to make space on the coffee table. From her designer handbag, she produced a thick folder of legal documents. "Mom, we need to discuss your advance directives. James prepared these for you." She opened the folder with businesslike efficiency. "Given what Dr. Mitchell told us about the timeline, we can't put this off any longer." I set down a photo of Cassandra's 16th birthday party and looked at the papers she was spreading between us. "What exactly are these?" "Living will, medical power of attorney, do not resuscitate orders, instructions for end-of-life care." She spoke rapidly, as if checking items off a to-do list. "Everything needs to be properly documented so there won't be any confusion when the time comes." "When the time comes for what?" Cassandra paused, meeting my eyes with an expression I'd never seen before. A mixture of impatience and something almost like contempt. "Mom, let's be realistic here. Dr. Mitchell said weeks to months. Your quality of life is only going to deteriorate from here. Wouldn't it be better to have clear guidelines about when to stop aggressive interventions?" I studied the documents, trying to understand the legal language. These seem very definitive. "Do not attempt resuscitation under any circumstances. Refuse life-sustaining treatments including dialysis, ventilators, or artificial nutrition." This reads like you've already decided I should die. "That's not what I'm saying," Cassandra replied quickly, but her tone lacked conviction. "I'm saying we should be prepared for the inevitable. You don't want to be kept alive artificially, do you? Hooked up to machines, suffering unnecessarily?" Something cold was growing in my chest, separate from my heart condition. "How do you know what I want, Cassandra? Have you asked me?" She shifted uncomfortably in her chair. "Well, I assumed. No one wants to be a burden on their family. And the cost of extended care, Mom, even with insurance, we're talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars. Money that could go toward Sophia and Lucas's college funds instead of prolonging the inevitable." There it was. The truth beneath her concern about my suffering. This wasn't about my comfort or dignity, it was about money. My money, specifically. and how quickly she could access it without the inconvenience of expensive medical care eating into her inheritance. "I see," I said quietly, setting the papers aside. "And if I refuse to sign these documents?" "Mom, you're being difficult. I'm trying to help you maintain some control over your situation while you still can make clear decisions. Once the kidney failure progresses, once you're on dialysis or in intensive care, these choices won't be yours anymore. So you're saying I should sign my own death warrant now, while I'm competent, to avoid the possibility that I might choose to fight for my life later?" Cassandra's mask of patience was slipping. "I'm saying you should be realistic about your prognosis and considerate of your family's needs. We all have to live with the consequences of your medical decisions." I stood up slowly, my weakened heart struggling with the sudden movement and the surge of emotion. "Whose needs exactly, Cassandra? Because it seems like you've given a lot of thought to how my death would benefit you, but very little thought to how my life might still have value." "That's not fair, Mom. I'm thinking about everyone. You, me, James, the kids. It's not easy. Watching someone you love suffer. I'm not suffering right now," I pointed out. "I'm sitting in my living room looking at family photos, having a conversation with my daughter. Yesterday I cooked dinner for Patricia and myself. This morning I read 2 chapters of a mystery novel. If this is suffering, then I suppose most of human existence qualifies." Cassandra gathered the unsigned documents with visible frustration. "Fine. Take some time to think about it. But Mom, these decisions need to be made soon, and there are other practical matters we need to address." "Such as your house, for one thing. The market is incredibly strong right now, and properties on Maple Ridge Drive are selling for premium prices. If we list it within the next month, we could probably get $50,000 over asking price." I sank back into my chair, genuinely shocked by her brazenness. "Cassandra, I live here. This is my home." "But for how long? Dr. Mitchell said your condition will require increasing care. Eventually, you'll need round-the-clock nursing, specialized equipment, possibly hospitalization. Wouldn't it make more sense to sell while you can maximize the profit and use that money for a really nice hospice facility?" "I want to die in my own home," I said firmly. "In the bedroom where your father and I slept for 20 years, in the house where you grew up." "Mom, that's a lovely sentiment, but it's not practical. Home hospice care is expensive, and this house is too big, too isolated for proper medical supervision. A good facility would have trained staff, immediate access to medical equipment, other families going through similar situations." I looked around my living room, at the piano where Cassandra had practiced for recitals, at the fireplace where we'd hung Christmas stockings every year, at the bay window where I'd watched her play in the front yard as a child. "This house has been in our family for 3 generations, Cassandra. Your great-grandmother planted the rose garden. Your grandfather built the addition where your childhood bedroom is located. And now it's time to let it go," she said, her voice taking on the practiced cadence of a real estate professional. "Mom, I know this is emotional, but we need to think strategically. The proceeds from the house sale, combined with your life, insurance policy and retirement accounts, would provide substantial financial security for the grandchildren's futures." "My life insurance policy?" I repeated. "Cassandra, I'm not dead yet." "Of course not. I just meant that when the time comes, we want to make sure everything is properly organized to minimize taxes and maximize the benefit to the family." I stared at my daughter, this woman who looked exactly like the little girl I'd raised, but seemed to have transformed into someone I didn't recognize. "Have you already contacted a real estate agent?" She had the grace to look embarrassed. "I may have made some preliminary inquiries, just to get a sense of current market values. For planning purposes." "Planning purposes," I repeated slowly. "While I'm sitting here in my living room, very much alive, you're already planning how to profit from my death." "Mom, that's a horrible way to put it. I'm trying to be responsible about family finances during a difficult time. Someone has to think about practical matters, and someone has to think about the human matters, I replied. Like the fact that I'm not ready to die yet. Like the fact that I want to spend whatever time I have left in my own home, surrounded by my own things, maintaining whatever independence I can for as long as possible. Cassandra stood up, smoothing her skirt with sharp, agitated movements. Fine. We'll table the house discussion for now. But Mom, these medical decisions can't wait indefinitely. I'm going to leave these papers with you, and I need you to really think about what's best for everyone involved. After she left, I sat alone among the scattered photo albums, holding a picture of Cassandra at age 10, gap-toothed and grinning as she showed off a science fair trophy. Where was that little girl who had once told me I was the best mom in the whole world? When had she been replaced by this calculating woman who seemed to view my medical crisis as a business opportunity? That evening, Mrs. Henderson came over, with homemade soup, and found me still sitting among the photographs. Without asking permission, she settled beside me and began looking through the albums, sharing memories of watching Cassandra grow up. "Eleanor, dear," she said eventually, "I hope you don't mind me saying this, but your daughter seems awfully focused on logistics for someone whose mother just received a terminal diagnosis." I showed her the advance directive papers Cassandra had left behind. Mrs. Henderson read through them with growing alarm, her expressions becoming more troubled with each page. "These documents essentially give her permission to make all medical decisions on your behalf," she said finally, "and they're worded very broadly. Refuse life-sustaining treatments could mean anything from extraordinary measures to basic medications. She says it's about preventing unnecessary suffering." "Who's suffering exactly?" Mrs. Henderson asked pointedly. "Because from where I sit, it looks like she's more concerned about the inconvenience to her life than the value of yours." That night, I called my old friend Margaret Riley, who had worked as a social worker specializing in elder care before retiring. After explaining my situation, I asked her to recommend an attorney, someone who specialized in protecting elderly patients' rights. "Eleanor," Margaret said carefully, "I want you to promise me something. Don't sign any documents until you've had them reviewed by independent legal counsel. What you're describing sounds like someone who's very eager to gain control over your medical and financial decisions. But she's my daughter. She loves me. I'm sure she does in her own way. But love and financial interest don't always align, especially when large sums of money are involved. How much is your estate worth, approximately?" I calculated quickly. "The house, my retirement accounts, life insurance, savings. Probably around $800,000. Margaret was quiet for a moment. "That's a substantial inheritance. And if Cassandra is already struggling financially, or if she has big plans for that money, she might be more motivated by timeline than by your well-being. You think she wants me to die quickly?" "I think she wants certainty and control. And sometimes those desires can override natural family loyalty, especially when people convince themselves they're acting in everyone's best interests." After hanging up, I lay in my bed upstairs, the bedroom Cassandra wanted me to abandon, and stared at the ceiling. For 72 years, I had believed that love was about sacrifice, about putting other people's needs before your own. I had loved my daughter that way, giving her everything I had without question or reservation. But what I was beginning to understand, with terrifying clarity, was that Cassandra had learned a very different definition of love. To her, love meant getting what you wanted from people who were obligated to give it to you. And right now, what she wanted was my quick, efficient, cost-effective death. The question was, what was I going to do about it? The attorney Margaret recommended was named Victoria Ashford, a sharp-eyed woman in her 50s who specialized in elder law and estate protection. Her office on Elm Street was modest but professional, with walls lined with legal texts and certificates that spoke to decades of experience protecting vulnerable clients from financial exploitation. "Mrs. Pemberton," she said after I'd explained my situation, I see cases like yours more often than I'd like to admit. Adult children who become impatient with the natural timeline of aging and illness, especially when significant assets are involved. She had reviewed the advance directive documents Cassandra left, and her expression had grown increasingly grim with each page. These papers are extremely broad in scope. If you signed them as written, your daughter would have virtually unlimited authority to refuse any medical treatment on your behalf, including treatments that might extend your life or improve your comfort. She says it's about preventing unnecessary suffering. I repeated Cassandra's justification, though it sounded hollow even to my own ears. Perhaps. But let me ask you this. Have you expressed any desire to refuse treatment? Have you indicated that you want to avoid life-sustaining measures? I shook my head. Actually, the opposite. I told her I want to fight this condition for as long as possible. I want to stay in my own home and maintain my independence. Victoria made notes on her legal pad. And yet she's pressuring you to sign documents that would prevent exactly that. Mrs. Pemberton, I need to ask some difficult questions about your daughter's financial situation and her relationship to your estate. For the next hour, Victoria walked me through a series of inquiries that painted an increasingly disturbing picture. How often had Cassandra asked for financial help over the years? Did she know the details of my will and life insurance policies? Had she shown unusual interest in my medical prognosis or timeline? As I answered her questions, patterns emerged that I'd never noticed before. Cassandra's requests for money had increased in frequency over the past 2 years. She'd insisted on handling my insurance reviews and financial planning. She'd pushed for me to add her name to my bank accounts for emergencies. Each individual request had seemed reasonable, but together they painted a picture of someone systematically positioning herself to benefit from my death. Mrs. Pemberton, I strongly recommend that we take some immediate protective measures, Victoria said. First, we need to review your current estate planning documents and make sure they truly reflect your wishes. Second, we should establish a comprehensive medical directive that preserves your right to make your own healthcare decisions. And third, we need to examine your financial accounts to ensure there haven't been any unauthorized transactions. You think Cassandra might have stolen from me? I think she's been very strategic about positioning herself to control your finances, and I want to make sure that control hasn't already been exercised inappropriately. Victoria arranged for us to meet with my financial advisor, Robert Chen, the following day. Robert had managed my retirement accounts for 15 years and knew my financial history intimately. What he revealed during our meeting left me stunned. Mrs. Pemberton, I have to tell you, I've been concerned about some recent activity on your accounts, Robert said, pulling up statements on his computer. Over the past 18 months, there have been several large withdrawals that seemed unusual given your typical spending patterns. He showed me the records. $40,000 withdrawn last March, allegedly for home repairs that I couldn't remember authorizing. $60,000 in August, supposedly for investment in Cassandra's real estate business. $35,000 in November for what was listed as family emergency expenses. I don't remember authorizing these withdrawals, I said, studying the statements with growing horror. The authorizations came through Cassandra, Robert explained carefully. She said you were having some memory issues and had asked her to handle certain financial transactions. I should have insisted on speaking with you directly, but she provided documentation showing she had power of attorney for financial matters. But I never gave her power of attorney, I protested. Victoria and Robert exchanged meaningful glances. Mrs. Pemberton, Victoria said gently, do you remember signing any papers that Cassandra described as just updating your banking information or streamlining your accounts? A cold memory surfaced. 6 months ago, Cassandra had brought papers to Sunday dinner, explaining that my bank was updating their procedures and needed new signature cards. I'd signed them without reading carefully, trusting her explanation completely. She said they were routine banking forms. I whispered. They weren't, Robert confirmed. They were power of attorney documents giving her broad authority over your financial accounts. The room seemed to tilt around me. Not only was Cassandra planning for my death, she'd been systematically stealing from me while I was alive. The woman I'd sacrificed everything for, the daughter I'd trusted with my life, had been methodically looting my assets while positioning herself to control my medical care. How much? I asked, though I dreaded the answer. Robert calculated quickly. Approximately $135,000 has been withdrawn from your accounts over the past 18 months using her power of attorney authorization. Can we get it back? Victoria's expression was grim. It's complicated. She had legal authority to make those withdrawals, even if that authority was obtained through deception. We'd have to prove she misrepresented the nature of the documents you signed, and we'd have to demonstrate that the money wasn't used for your benefit as claimed. It wasn't used for my benefit, I said firmly. I never saw any of that money. No home repairs were done, no family emergencies were resolved. That money went straight into her accounts or her business. Then we have grounds for action, Victoria said. But Mrs. Pemberton, we need to move quickly. If your daughter realizes you've discovered her financial activities, she might accelerate her timeline for gaining complete control over your affairs. Over the next 3 hours, we developed what Victoria called a protection strategy. First, we revoked the fraudulent power of attorney and established new banking arrangements that required my personal authorization for any withdrawals. Second, we drafted a comprehensive medical directive that preserved my right to make my own healthcare decisions while specifically rejecting the broad restrictions Cassandra had tried to impose. Third, we began documenting evidence of financial exploitation that could be used to recover the stolen funds. Most importantly, Victoria emphasized, we need to do all of this without alerting Cassandra to our activities. If she realizes you're taking legal action, she might become desperate and make decisions that could put you in physical danger. The phrase physical danger sent chills through me. You think she might try to hurt me? I think she might try to accelerate your medical decline, Victoria said carefully. People who are desperate to inherit money have been known to withhold medications, neglect care requirements, or even smother patients in their sleep. I'm not saying your daughter would do any of those things, but we need to be cautious. As I drove home from Victoria's office, my mind reeled with the implications of what I'd discovered. The daughter I'd loved unconditionally had been systematically stealing from me while planning to control my death. Every expression of concern about my health had been calculated manipulation. Every offer to help had been designed to gain more access to my assets or decision-making authority. When I arrived home, I found Cassandra's car in my driveway. Through the front window, I could see her in my living room, talking animatedly on her phone while rifling through papers on my desk. My heart, already damaged by disease, nearly stopped at the sight of her going through my private documents. I sat in my car for several minutes, gathering courage before going inside. When I entered, Cassandra quickly ended her phone call and turned to me with a bright smile that now looked predatory rather than loving. Mom! Perfect timing. I've been organizing your paperwork while you were out. Everything was so scattered, and with your memory being unreliable lately, I thought it would be helpful to get your important documents properly filed. My memory is fine, I said quietly, noting that several file folders were missing from my desk. What documents were you organizing? Oh, just insurance papers, medical records, financial statements, the kinds of things that need to be accessible if there's an emergency. She gestured vaguely toward a box on the coffee table. I've created a comprehensive filing system so everything important is in one place. In one place where you can access it, you mean? Something flickered in her expression, a brief flash of anger quickly suppressed. Mom, I'm trying to help you stay organized during a difficult time. With your diagnosis, it's important to have these systems in place. I walked to my desk and opened the drawers. Several were completely empty. Where are my bank statements, Cassandra? Safe in the filing system. Why do you ask? Because I want to review them. Tonight. All of them. Her smile became strained. Mom, you seem upset about something. Is this about the advance directive papers? Because I want you to know, there's no pressure to sign anything you're not comfortable with. I looked at this woman who shared my DNA but seemed to have inherited none of my values. This daughter who had learned to lie as easily as breathing, and felt something harden inside my chest that had nothing to do with heart failure. I want you to leave now, Cassandra. Mom, I think we should talk about whatever's bothering you. Communication is important, especially during stressful times like this. I want you to leave, I repeated, my voice stronger. And I want you to bring back whatever documents you took from my desk. For a moment, her mask slipped completely, and I saw the cold calculation underneath. Then she recovered, gathering her purse and the box of my papers with wounded dignity. I don't understand why you're being hostile toward someone who's trying to help you, she said, but I'll respect your wishes. I hope when you've had time to think about it, you'll realize I'm on your side. After she left, I called Victoria. Immediately. She was in my house going through my papers, I reported. I think she took several important documents. We need to accelerate our timeline, Victoria said grimly. Mrs. Pemberton, I'm going to ask you to do something that might seem extreme, but I think it's necessary for your protection. I want you to stay somewhere else tonight. Do you have a friend who could take you in? You really think I'm in physical danger? I think a woman who's stolen over $100,000 from her dying mother might be capable of anything if she feels cornered. And right now, she knows you're becoming suspicious. That night, I slept in Mrs. Henderson's spare bedroom, my heart medications hidden in my purse, my cell phone on the nightstand in case I needed to call for help. For 72 years, I had believed that family bonds were sacred, that mothers and daughters shared unbreakable connections of love and loyalty. Now I lay awake in a stranger's bed, afraid of my own child, finally understanding that some people view love as a commodity to be exploited rather than a gift to be treasured. Tomorrow, I would begin fighting back against the daughter who had spent months preparing for my death. The war for my life was about to begin. The confrontation I'd been dreading came sooner than expected. At exactly 8 o'clock the next morning, while I was having breakfast with Mrs. Henderson, Cassandra's car pulled into the driveway with unusual urgency. Through the kitchen window, I watched her stride toward Mrs. Henderson's front door, her face tight with barely controlled anger. She knows, I said quietly, my coffee cup trembling in my hands. Mrs. Henderson squeezed my shoulder reassuringly. Let me handle this, dear. The doorbell rang with sharp, insistent chimes. Mrs. Henderson opened the door to find Cassandra standing on the porch, her professional composure cracking around the edges. Where is my mother? Cassandra demanded without preamble. Her car is gone. She's not answering her phone and she's not at home. Eleanor is perfectly safe, Mrs. Henderson replied calmly. She's chosen to stay here temporarily. I need to speak with her immediately. There are urgent matters we need to discuss. I appeared in the doorway behind Mrs. Henderson and Cassandra's. Expression shifted from anger to wounded confusion. Mom, what's going on? Why are you hiding from me? Mrs. Henderson, what have you been telling her? I'm not hiding, I said, surprised by the steadiness of my own voice. I'm protecting myself. From you. Cassandra's face went through a series of rapid changes. Shock, hurt, then something darker. Protecting yourself from me? Mom, I'm your daughter. I'm the one who's been taking care of you, making sure you have everything you need. Like making sure you have access to my bank accounts? I asked quietly. The color drained from her face. For a moment, she looked genuinely afraid. But then her real estate training kicked in, and she began damage control. If this is about the financial arrangements we discussed, I can explain everything. Those transactions were all authorized. All for your benefit. $135,000 for my benefit? I stepped fully into view, my voice growing stronger with each word. What benefit exactly, Cassandra? Because I don't see any home repairs, I don't remember any family emergencies, and I certainly never authorized you to take that money. Mrs. Henderson moved protectively closer to me as Cassandra's composure began to crumble. Mom, you're not thinking clearly. The stress of your diagnosis, the medications, they're affecting your judgment. We talked about all those expenses. You agreed to them. I never agreed to give you power of attorney either. You lied to me about what those papers were. I was trying to protect you. Cassandra's voice rose sharply. You're sick, Mom. Your memory isn't reliable anymore. Someone needs to make sure your finances are properly managed. By stealing from me? I wasn't stealing. That money was for legitimate expenses. Business investments that will benefit the whole family. Maintenance costs for your property. Preparing for your future care needs. Mrs. Henderson stepped forward, her voice cutting through Cassandra's. Justifications. Young lady, I've known your mother for 40 years, and her memory is perfectly clear. What you've done is called financial elder abuse, and it's a felony. Cassandra turned on Mrs. Henderson with sudden viciousness. This is none of your business. This is between me and my mother, and you have no right to interfere in our family matters. Someone needs to interfere, Mrs. Henderson replied calmly. When that family includes a daughter who steals from her dying mother. I am not stealing, Cassandra screamed, her professional mask completely gone now. That money is going to be mine anyway. I'm just accessing it early to handle necessary expenses. The raw honesty of her outburst hung in the air like poison. In her anger, she had revealed the truth that her careful justifications had been trying to hide. To Cassandra, my money was already hers. My death was just an inconvenient delay in her inheritance. There it is, I said quietly. The truth. You've been spending my inheritance while I'm still alive because you consider me already dead. Cassandra realized her mistake and tried to backtrack. That's not what I meant. I'm under tremendous stress trying to manage your care and my own family's needs. Sometimes I don't express myself clearly. You expressed yourself perfectly clearly. My money is yours. My house is yours. My life is just an obstacle to your financial planning. James's Mercedes pulled into the driveway then, and Cassandra's husband emerged looking grim and purposeful. He approached us with the measured stride of someone accustomed to managing legal crises. Eleanor, he said, nodding politely to me before turning to his wife. Cassandra, we need to talk. Now. James, thank God you're here. Mom is being completely unreasonable. She's staying with the neighbor and making wild accusations about our financial arrangements. James looked uncomfortable, shifting his weight from foot to foot. Eleanor, I think there may have been some misunderstandings about the power of attorney documents. Perhaps we should sit down and clarify everyone's expectations. The only misunderstanding, I replied, was mine thinking that my daughter was trustworthy. But I understand the situation perfectly now. Mom, please, Cassandra pleaded, tears beginning to form in her eyes. You're my mother. I love you. I would never intentionally hurt you. But you would intentionally steal from me. You would forge legal documents to gain control of my finances. You would pressure me to sign away my right to medical treatment, so I'll die quickly and cheaply. James placed a restraining hand on Cassandra's arm as she started to speak. Eleanor, from a legal standpoint, all of Cassandra's financial activities were conducted under properly executed power of attorney. If there were misrepresentations about the nature of those documents, we can certainly discuss corrections. We're past discussions, James. I've consulted with an attorney, and we're pursuing both criminal charges for fraud and civil action to recover the stolen funds. The impact of this statement on both of them was immediate and dramatic. James went pale, while Cassandra made a sound like she'd been physically struck. "Criminal charges?" Cassandra whispered. "Mom, you can't be serious. I'm your daughter." "Which makes what you've done even more devastating. You used my love for you as a weapon against me." "We can work this out within the family," James said quickly, his lawyer instincts kicking in. "There's no need to involve law enforcement or civil courts. We can arrange full restitution, perhaps some counseling to improve family communication. The only communication I need is a confession about where my money went and a timeline for returning it." Cassandra was crying openly now, but her tears felt manipulative rather than genuine. "Mom, I made mistakes. I was scared about your diagnosis, overwhelmed by trying to manage everything, and I made some poor decisions. But we can fix this. We can go back to the way things were. The way things were included you systematically robbing me while pretending to care about my welfare." "Why would I want to go back to that?" "Because I'm your daughter," she wailed. "Because you love me. Because family forgives each other." I looked at this woman who shared my DNA but seemed to have inherited none of my values, and felt something. Final click into place inside my chest. Family protects each other, Cassandra. Family doesn't prey on each other. What you've done isn't a mistake. It's a pattern of calculated exploitation. I was protecting your interests. You were protecting your interests. My death timeline, my inheritance, your financial convenience. None of it had anything to do with my well-being. James tried one more diplomatic approach. "Eleanor, perhaps. We could arrange a family meeting with a mediator. These kinds of conflicts often stem from communication breakdowns rather than malicious intent." "The communication is perfectly clear," I replied. "Cassandra wants me to die quickly and quietly, so she can inherit my assets without the inconvenience of paying for my medical care. She's already stolen over $100,000 to support that goal. The only question now is whether she'll return the money voluntarily or be forced to return it through legal action." "You're destroying our family," Cassandra sobbed. "Over money. You're choosing money over your own daughter." The irony of her accusation was breathtaking. "I'm not the one who chose money over family, Cassandra. You made that choice when you decided to steal from me. You made it again when you tried to trick me into signing away my medical rights. This isn't about money, it's about trust. And you destroyed that beyond repair." "So what happens now?" James asked, his professional composure masking what I suspected was panic about his own legal exposure as Cassandra's accomplice. "Now I protect myself and my assets from further exploitation. I'm revoking all financial powers of attorney, changing my will to reflect my daughter's true character, and ensuring that any future medical decisions remain under my control." "You're writing me out of your will?" Cassandra's voice was barely a whisper. "I'm writing out the daughter who tried to kill me for money. If the daughter who loves me unconditionally wants to resurface, we can discuss modifications. But that person seems to have disappeared sometime over the past 18 months. As James led the still sobbing Cassandra back to their car, she turned back to me one final time. "This isn't over, Mom. You need me. You can't manage your medical care alone, and when you realize that, I'll be waiting." There was something in her tone, not quite a threat, but close enough to send chills down my spine. As their car pulled away, Mrs. Henderson locked her front door and turned to me with concern etched across her face. "Eleanor, I think you need to accelerate your legal protections. That young woman is desperate, and desperate people do dangerous things." I nodded, already reaching for my phone to call Victoria. The war for my life was escalating, and I was beginning to understand that my daughter might be willing to fight, much dirtier than I had imagined. The question was, how far would she go to secure her inheritance? The next phase of my medical crisis began 3 days later. just as Victoria and I were finalizing the legal documents to protect my assets. I woke up in Mrs. Henderson's guest room feeling more exhausted than usual, my chest tight with a different kind of pressure than I'd experienced before. When I tried to stand, the room spun violently and I had to grip the nightstand to keep from falling. "Mrs. Henderson!" I called out, my voice weaker than intended. She appeared within seconds, took one look at my face, and immediately reached for her phone. "We're going to the emergency room. Now." The ambulance ride to Rosemere General felt surreal, like déjà vu of my original diagnosis, but somehow more ominous. The paramedics were asking the same questions, but my responses felt different this time, more labored, more uncertain. My body was failing faster than anyone had predicted. Dr. Mitchell met us in the emergency department, her expression grave as she reviewed my symptoms and vital signs. "Mrs. Pemberton, your kidney function has deteriorated significantly since our last visit. We need to run some urgent tests, but I'm concerned we may be looking at acute kidney failure on top of your heart condition." The tests confirmed her fears. My kidneys were shutting down rapidly, much faster than the gradual decline she had anticipated. "We need to discuss dialysis," she said after reviewing the results. "Without it, you're looking at days to weeks, rather than weeks to months." "And with dialysis?" "Potentially several months, possibly longer if your heart condition stabilizes." "But Mrs. Pemberton, I need to be honest with you. Dialysis at your age, with your heart condition, is going to be extremely difficult. 3 sessions per week, 4 hours each session, significant strain on your cardiovascular system." I absorbed this information while Mrs. Henderson held my hand. Days to weeks without treatment. Months of grueling dialysis sessions if I chose to fight. Neither option seemed particularly appealing, but the choice between dying immediately and fighting for more time was clear. "I want the dialysis," I said firmly. "I'm not ready to give up yet." Dr. Mitchell nodded approvingly. "I'll arrange for a consultation with our nephrology team and get you scheduled for emergency dialysis tomorrow. We'll need to place a temporary access port today and discuss long-term options." As the medical team prepared for the procedure to place the dialysis port, I noticed Cassandra rushing down the hospital corridor. Someone had called her, probably the hospital's emergency contact system, and she burst into my room looking genuinely panicked. "Mom, what happened? They said you were in kidney failure, that you needed emergency treatment." For a moment, seeing the fear in her eyes, I almost forgot about our recent confrontation. This was the daughter I remembered from childhood illnesses and scraped knees, the one who seemed genuinely concerned about my well-being. But then I noticed how quickly her eyes scanned the medical equipment, the way she positioned herself to overhear conversations with the medical staff. "Dr. Mitchell, what exactly are we talking about in terms of prognosis?" Cassandra asked, pulling the doctor aside. "I'm her daughter and medical power of attorney, so I need to understand all the options." "Actually," I interrupted from my hospital bed, "she's not my medical power of attorney anymore. I revoked that authorization and appointed Mrs. Henderson as my healthcare advocate." Cassandra whirled around, her face cycling through shock, hurt, and anger. "Mom, you can't be serious. Mrs. Henderson isn't even family. She can't make medical decisions for you." "She can and she will," I said quietly, "because unlike some people, she has my best interests at heart, rather than her financial interests." Dr. Mitchell looked uncomfortable with the family drama playing out in her medical setting. "Perhaps we should focus on the immediate treatment decisions. Mrs. Pemberton, you've chosen to proceed with dialysis. That's what matters right now." "Dialysis?" Cassandra's voice rose sharply. "Mom, do you understand what that means? 3 times. A week? For hours at a time? For the rest of your life? The physical strain? The complications? The cost?" "I understand it means staying alive," I replied, "which seems to concern you." "That's not fair. I'm concerned about your quality of life." "You're suffering. Nobody wants to see their mother go through unnecessary pain. Mrs. Henderson spoke up from her chair beside my bed. Eleanor is competent to make her own medical decisions. She wants to fight for more time, and that's her right. Fight for more. Time doing what? Cassandra's mask was slipping again, her frustration becoming visible. Mom, be realistic. You're 72 years old with end-stage heart and kidney failure. How much quality time can dialysis really give you? Wouldn't it be more peaceful to focus on comfort care instead of prolonging the inevitable? Dr. Mitchell intervened diplomatically. These are very personal decisions that each patient needs to make based on their own values and goals. Mrs. Pemberton has chosen aggressive treatment, and will support that choice. But doctor, surely you can explain the realistic outcomes? The survival statistics for elderly patients on dialysis, the likelihood of complications, infections, cardiovascular events during treatment? I watched my daughter essentially argue with my doctor about why I should be allowed to die, and felt something cold and final settle in my chest. This wasn't concern for my well-being. This was lobbying for my death. Cassandra, I said quietly, I need you to leave. Mom, I'm trying to help you make an informed decision. You're trying to convince my doctor to let me die. There's a difference. That's not true. I want what's best for you. What's best for me is living as long as possible. What's best for you is me dying as quickly as possible so you can inherit my money. Those two things are incompatible. Dr. Mitchell cleared her throat diplomatically. Perhaps family discussions should continue outside the treatment room. We need to prep Mrs. Pemberton for her port placement. As the medical team prepared me for the procedure, Cassandra lingered in the doorway, her expression a mixture of defeat and something more dangerous. Mom, you're making a mistake. This treatment is going to be hell, and when you realize that, I hope you'll reconsider more reasonable options. After she left, Mrs. Henderson squeezed my hand. Eleanor, I'm worried about what she might do if you go through with this treatment plan. She seems very invested in you, not fighting for your life. The port placement procedure was more painful than expected, and the recovery left me feeling weak and disoriented. As I drifted in and out of consciousness, I overheard conversations in the hallway outside my room that chilled me more than any medical diagnosis. Cassandra was on her phone, speaking in the low, urgent tones of someone who didn't want to be overheard. She's insisting on dialysis, 3 times a week, probably, for months. The costs are going to be astronomical and it's going to drain the estate. No, I can't convince her otherwise. She's appointed that neighbor woman as her medical advocate. I don't know what other options we have. I pretended to sleep as she continued the conversation, but every word burned itself into my memory. My daughter was discussing my medical treatment as a financial problem to be solved, consulting with someone about other options for handling my inconvenient desire to stay alive. When she ended the call and returned to my bedside, her demeanor had shifted to forced cheerfulness. How are you feeling, Mom? The procedure went well, according to Dr. Mitchell. Who were you talking to in the hallway? I asked directly. Just James, updating him on your condition. He's concerned about you, too. He's concerned about the cost of my treatment, you mean? Mom, that's not fair. We're all concerned about different aspects of this situation. Of course, the financial impact matters. Your medical bills are going to be enormous, and insurance doesn't cover everything. My medical bills are my responsibility, not yours. But Mom, you don't have unlimited resources. If this treatment drags on for months, it could exhaust your entire estate. There wouldn't be anything left for your grandchildren's education funds. There it was again. The assumption that my money was meant for other people, that my life was less important than preserving assets for future generations. Let me be very clear, Cassandra. I will spend every penny I have to stay alive as long as possible. If that means there's no inheritance left, so be it. Her face went through several emotions before settling on barely controlled anger. So you're willing to impoverish your own grandchildren out of spite? I'm willing to use my own money for my own medical care, which is hardly spite. It's called responsibility. This is about punishing me for the financial misunderstandings, isn't it? You're going to waste your entire estate on futile medical treatment just to make sure I don't inherit anything. The conversation was interrupted by Dr. Mitchell's return with the dialysis schedule. Mrs. Pemberton, we can start your first session tomorrow morning. The nephrology team will explain the process, but I want you to know that many patients find dialysis less daunting than they initially expected. As Dr. Mitchell outlined the treatment plan, I watched Cassandra's face carefully. Instead of relief that I would receive life-extending treatment, I saw calculation, frustration, and something that looked disturbingly like determination. That night, as I tried to sleep in my hospital bed, I couldn't shake the feeling that my daughter was planning something. Her phone conversation about other options, her visible anger about my treatment choices, her obsession with preserving the inheritance she'd already been stealing from. It all pointed toward a woman who might be desperate enough to take more direct action. The question that kept me awake wasn't about my medical prognosis anymore. It was about whether my own daughter might try to ensure that my expensive, inconvenient fight for life came to a quicker end. Tomorrow I would begin dialysis, but tonight I wondered if I would live long enough to complete the treatment series. Because sometimes the greatest threat to a patient's life isn't the disease they're fighting. It's the people who benefit from their death. My first dialysis session was scheduled for 6 in the morning, which meant I was awakened at 5 for pre-treatment preparations. As the nurse helped me into a wheelchair for transport to the dialysis unit, I noticed Mrs. Henderson was already in the hallway, clutching a thermos of coffee and looking like she hadn't slept. "I hope you don't mind," she said, falling into step beside my wheelchair. "I wanted to be here for your first treatment. Victoria said someone should stay with you, given the circumstances." The dialysis unit was a revelation, not the grim, sterile environment I had imagined, but a surprisingly comfortable space with reclining chairs, individual televisions, and large windows overlooking the hospital's healing garden. Other patients were already connected to their machines, reading books, watching morning news programs, or simply resting peacefully. "Mrs. Pemberton?" A cheerful nurse named Sandra approached with my chart. "Ready to get started? I know this seems overwhelming. The first time, but I promise it's much more manageable than most people expect." She was right. The actual process of connecting to the dialysis machine was less invasive than I'd feared, and once the treatment began, I found myself oddly relaxed. The 4-hour session gave me time to think, to read, and to observe the other patients who were fighting their own battles against kidney failure. Mrs. Henderson settled into the visitor's chair beside my recliner, pulling out her knitting. "This isn't so bad," she murmured approvingly. "Quite peaceful, actually." Around 9 o'clock, Cassandra appeared in the doorway of the dialysis unit, scanning the room until she spotted me. She approached with what I now recognized as her professional smile, the one she used with difficult real estate clients. "Mom, how are you feeling? I brought you some magazines and your favorite tea." She held up a small gift bag, but her eyes were focused on the dialysis machine and its readouts rather than on my face. "I'm feeling fine," I replied carefully. "The treatment isn't as difficult as I expected." "That's wonderful," she said, though her tone suggested otherwise. "How much longer do you have?" "About 2 hours," Sandra answered from the monitoring station. "Mrs. Pemberton is doing beautifully for her first session." Cassandra nodded, then pulled up a second visitor's chair. "I was hoping we could talk while you're occupied here, about some practical matters." Mrs. Henderson looked up from her knitting, her expression alert. "What kind of practical matters?" "Family matters," Cassandra replied with barely concealed irritation. "Private conversations between a mother and daughter." "Mrs. Henderson is my healthcare advocate," I said firmly. "Anything you need to discuss with me can be discussed in front of her." Cassandra's professional smile became strained. "Fine. Mom, I've been thinking about your treatment plan, and I'm concerned about the long-term sustainability. 3 sessions per week for months. That's an enormous commitment, not just financially, but physically and emotionally. It's a commitment to staying alive, I replied. Most people consider that worthwhile. But at what cost? And I don't just mean money, though that's certainly a factor. I mean the cost to your quality of life, to the family's emotional well-being, to everyone who loves you and has to watch you go through this ordeal. Mrs. Henderson set down her knitting. Cassandra, your mother is handling the treatment beautifully. She's reading, she's comfortable, she's maintaining her independence. What exactly about this seems like an ordeal to you? The endless hospital visits, the medical complications that are bound to arise, the gradual deterioration despite all this intervention. It's prolonging suffering, not preventing it. I studied my daughter's face as she spoke, noting the practiced cadence of her arguments. You've been researching dialysis outcomes, haven't you? Looking for statistics to support your position. I've been educating myself about what we're all facing, she admitted. And the data isn't encouraging for patients in your age bracket, with your additional health conditions. What data specifically? Mrs. Henderson asked pointedly. Cassandra pulled out her phone, scrolling through what appeared to be bookmarked articles. Survival rates for elderly patients on dialysis are significantly lower than for younger patients. Complications include increased risk of cardiovascular events, infections, depression, and declining cognitive function. Many patients experience what doctors call dialysis fatigue, a chronic exhaustion that severely impacts quality of life. And your conclusion from this research is what, exactly? I asked. That we should seriously consider comfort care instead of aggressive treatment. Focus on pain management and dignity rather than prolonging the inevitable. Sandra, the dialysis nurse, had been listening to this conversation while monitoring my treatment. She approached with a patient expression that suggested she'd heard similar family discussions before. "Excuse me for interrupting," she said diplomatically, "but I wanted to share some perspective from our unit. We have patients in their 80s and 90s who've been on dialysis for years and maintain excellent quality of life. Mrs. Patterson, over there," she gestured to an elderly woman reading a romance novel in the corner, "is 86 and has been coming here for 3 years. She travels, she babysits her great-grandchildren, she volunteers at the animal shelter." Cassandra's expression darkened. "But surely those are exceptional cases. The average outcomes must be more concerning." "Every patient is different," Sandra replied evenly. "Some do experience significant challenges, but many others adapt well and live full, meaningful lives. The key is having good support systems and maintaining a positive outlook." "Exactly," Mrs. Henderson added, picking up her knitting again. "Eleanor has plenty of both." "I'm just trying to be realistic about what we're all facing," Cassandra insisted, but there was an edge of desperation in her voice now. "Mom, you haven't experienced the cumulative effects yet. Wait until you've been doing this for weeks or months. Wait until the complications start arising." "Are you hoping for complications?" I asked quietly. The question hung in the air like a challenge. Cassandra's face went through several rapid changes before settling on wounded indignation. "How can you ask me something like that? I'm your daughter. I love you. Then why do you keep arguing for me to give up treatment? Why does every conversation we have focus on why I should die sooner rather than later?" "I'm not arguing for you to die. I'm arguing for you to accept reality and focus on quality over quantity of life." "Whose definition of quality?" Mrs. Henderson interjected. "Because Eleanor seems to be enjoying her life just fine. For now. But what about when the treatments become more difficult? What about when she's too weak to maintain her independence? What about when the medical bills exhaust her entire estate?" There it was again, the financial concern masquerading as medical anxiety. "Cassandra," I said carefully, "I need to ask you something directly. Are you more concerned about my suffering or about the cost of preventing my death?" That's not a fair question. It's a necessary question, because your behavior suggests that you view my medical treatment as a financial drain rather than a life-saving intervention. Mom, you're twisting my words. I'm trying to help you think through all the implications of this decision. The only implication that matters to me is staying alive to see my grandchildren grow up, to spend more time with people who actually want me alive, to fight this disease for as long as I can. Cassandra stood abruptly, her composure finally cracking completely. Fine. Exhaust yourself with these treatments. Drain your entire estate on futile medical care. But don't expect me to pretend this is a reasonable choice when you could be focusing on dignity and closure instead of clinging desperately to a few more months of declining health. The entire dialysis unit had gone quiet, other patients and staff pretending not to listen to our family drama. Sandra moved closer to my chair, her protective instincts clearly activated. I think, Mrs. Henderson said with icy calm, that Cassandra should leave now. Eleanor needs to focus on her treatment, not on defending her right to live. This isn't over, Cassandra said, gathering her purse. Mom, when you realize how grueling this treatment becomes, when you understand the toll it's taking on everyone who cares about you, I hope you'll reconsider more peaceful options. After she left, the dialysis unit slowly returned to its previous tranquil atmosphere. Sandra checked my vital signs and adjusted my machine settings, her movements gentle and reassuring. I'm sorry you had to deal with that during your treatment, she said quietly. Family dynamics can be challenging when someone is facing serious illness. Have you seen this before? I asked. Family members arguing against treatment? Sandra glanced around to make sure we weren't overheard, then leaned closer. More often than you might think. Sometimes family members have difficulty accepting that dialysis can provide good quality of life for years. And sometimes, she paused delicately, there are other factors that influence their perspective on treatment decisions. Other factors? Financial considerations, inheritance concerns, the burden of caregiving responsibilities. Not everyone handles those pressures. Ethically, Mrs. Henderson looked up from her knitting with sharp attention. Are you saying we should be concerned about Eleanor's safety? I'm saying that patients with strong advocacy and support systems tend to have better outcomes than those who face family pressure to discontinue treatment. Eleanor is fortunate to have you looking out for her interests. As my first dialysis session concluded, I felt stronger and more clear-headed than I had in days. The treatment was working, my body was responding well, and I was more determined than ever to fight for every additional day of life I could gain. But I was also increasingly aware that my greatest challenge might not be kidney failure or heart disease. It might be protecting myself from a daughter who seemed to view my survival as a problem to be solved rather than a blessing to be celebrated. The war for my life was far from over, and I was beginning to understand that some battles would be fought not in hospital rooms, but in the darker territories of family loyalty and financial desperation. 2 weeks into my dialysis routine, an unexpected ally emerged from the most unlikely source. I was finishing my morning treatment when a well-dressed man in his 60s approached my chair, introducing himself as Dr. Richard Pemberton, my great-nephew, the grandson of my late brother Thomas. Aunt Eleanor, he said warmly, I heard about your diagnosis through the family grapevine, and I wanted to check on you. I'm sorry it took me so long to visit. Richard was a physician himself, a cardiologist practicing in the neighboring city of Millbrook Heights. I hadn't seen him in several years, but we'd always maintained a cordial relationship through holiday cards and occasional family gatherings. I've been following your case through the medical records, he continued, settling into the visitor's chair that Mrs. Henderson usually occupied. Your response to dialysis has been remarkably positive. Dr. Mitchell speaks very highly of your attitude and compliance with treatment. I'm trying to stay optimistic, I replied, genuinely pleased to see a family member who seemed supportive of my fight for life. It's more manageable than I expected. That's excellent to hear. I actually wanted to discuss something with you. A potential treatment option that might not have been fully explored yet. He pulled out a tablet and showed me some medical articles. There are some newer cardiac medications that, combined with your current dialysis regimen, might significantly improve your overall prognosis. For the next 30 minutes, Richard outlined treatment possibilities that Dr. Mitchell hadn't mentioned, not because she was inadequate, but because they required specialized cardiac monitoring that wasn't readily available at Rosemere General. I'd like to arrange a consultation at our facility in Millbrook Heights. We have a cardiac renal specialty program that might be perfect for your case. That sounds wonderful, I said, feeling a surge of hope. But I should mention that the family dynamics around my treatment have been complicated. Richard's expression grew serious. Complicated how? I explained Cassandra's opposition to my treatment, her financial exploitation, and her persistent arguments for comfort care instead of aggressive intervention. As I spoke, Richard's face darkened with what looked like genuine anger. Aunt Eleanor, that's unconscionable. You have every right to fight for your life, and you certainly have the right to spend your own money on your own medical care. He paused, choosing his words carefully. I hope you don't mind me asking, but have you taken steps to protect yourself legally? I have an attorney, and we've revoked Cassandra's financial powers. But Richard, I'm worried she might try something more direct if she becomes desperate enough. His expression grew even more grave. What kind of direct action are you worried about? Before I could answer, Cassandra herself appeared in the dialysis unit doorway. She spotted Richard immediately, and I watched her face cycle through surprise, calculation, and what looked like relief. "Richard, what a wonderful surprise!" she exclaimed, approaching with her professional smile firmly in place. "I didn't know you were visiting, Mom." "Cassandra?" Richard replied coolly, standing but not embracing her. "I came to check on Eleanor's medical situation and discuss some additional treatment options." "Additional treatments?" Cassandra's smile became strained. "Richard, I don't know if Mom has explained her current condition to you, but she's quite advanced in her illness. Dr. Mitchell has been very clear about the prognosis." "Dr. Mitchell has been appropriately cautious," Richard corrected. "But there are specialized interventions available that might significantly extend Eleanor's life and improve her quality of life." I watched this exchange with fascination, noting how Cassandra's body language shifted from welcoming to defensive. "Richard, as a family member, I'm sure you want what's best for Mom. But sometimes the most loving thing is accepting reality rather than pursuing futile treatments that only prolong suffering." "Futile treatments?" Richard's voice carried the authority of a physician who was accustomed to making life-and-death decisions. "Cassandra, Eleanor is responding beautifully to dialysis. Her cardiac function has stabilized. She's alert, comfortable, and maintaining her independence. What exactly about her current condition suggests futility? The long-term prognosis, the quality of life issues, the enormous financial burden on the family? The financial burden on which family members specifically?" Richard interrupted. "Because as far as I know, Eleanor is paying for her own medical care with her own resources." Cassandra's composure cracked slightly. "It's not that simple, Richard. There are other considerations. The emotional toll on everyone who loves her, the practical challenges of managing her care, the impact on her grandchildren. The impact on her grandchildren of having their grandmother alive and fighting for her health seems positive to me," Richard replied, "unless there are other factors you're concerned about." I decided to intervene before the conversation became a complete confrontation. "Richard, I appreciate your medical insights and your offer to explore additional treatments. Cassandra, I understand you're concerned about various aspects of my care, but I've made my decision to pursue aggressive treatment." "Mom," Cassandra said, her voice taking on a pleading quality, "I just want you to consider all the angles." "Richard, Surely as a physician, you understand that sometimes the most humane choice is comfort care rather than prolonging the inevitable. In cases where treatment is truly futile, yes, Richard agreed. But Eleanor's case doesn't meet that criteria. She's a viable candidate for multiple interventions that could extend her life significantly. Extend it for what purpose? Cassandra's frustration was becoming visible. She's 72 years old, Richard. How many more years can these treatments realistically provide? And at what cost? At what cost to whom? Richard asked pointedly. Because the only person who should be concerned about the cost of Eleanor's medical care is Eleanor herself. That's easy for you to say. You don't have to watch her struggle through these treatments day after day. You don't have to manage her medications, arrange her transportation, handle the insurance complications. Actually, Mrs. Henderson interjected, having returned from the cafeteria, I handle most of those responsibilities, and I can tell you that Eleanor is managing beautifully. Cassandra turned on Mrs. Henderson with obvious irritation. This is a family discussion about medical decisions. I don't think outside opinions are appropriate. Eleanor made me her healthcare advocate, Mrs. Henderson replied calmly. That makes my opinion very appropriate. Richard looked between all of us, clearly recognizing the underlying family dynamics. Perhaps we should focus on the medical options available rather than who has authority to make decisions. Eleanor, would you like me to arrange the consultation at Millbrook Heights? Yes, I said firmly. I want to explore every possible treatment that might extend my life. Mom, Cassandra said desperately, please think about this carefully. More aggressive treatments mean more complications, more hospitalizations, more suffering for everyone involved. The only suffering I see, Richard observed, is Eleanor's suffering from family pressure to give up her fight for life. That's not fair, Cassandra protested. I love my mother. I want what's best for her. Then support her choice to pursue treatment that might save her life, Richard replied. Unless there's some reason you don't want her to live longer. The implication hung in the air like an accusation. Cassandra's face went through several rapid changes before settling on wounded dignity. I resent the suggestion that I don't want my mother to live. I simply want her to accept reality and focus on quality over quantity. Quality according to whom? Richard pressed. Because Eleanor seems quite satisfied with her current quality of life. For now. But what about in 6 months when the treatments become more grueling? What about when complications arise? What about when she's too weak to make rational decisions? If and when that happens, we'll address it then, I said firmly. But I'm not going to die today because you're worried about hypothetical complications. 6 months from now. Cassandra gathered her purse with sharp, agitated movements. Fine. Pursue these additional treatments. Exhaust yourself and your resources on futile medical interventions. But don't expect me to support decisions that I believe are harmful to your best interests. I don't expect you to support anything, I replied quietly. I expect you to respect my right to make my own medical decisions without harassment or sabotage. After she left, Richard sat back down, his expression troubled. Aunt Eleanor, I need to ask you something directly. Do you feel safe around Cassandra? Are you concerned she might try to interfere with your treatment in more direct ways? The question I'd been avoiding finally voiced aloud. Yes, I admitted. I'm concerned about what she might do if she becomes desperate enough. Then we need to take protective measures immediately, Richard said. I'm going to arrange for you to transfer your care to Millbrook Heights, where we can ensure your treatment continues without family interference. And I think we should discuss involving adult protective services. Mrs. Henderson nodded approvingly. I've been thinking the same thing. Cassandra's behavior has moved beyond family disagreement into something more concerning. As my dialysis session concluded, I felt a mix of relief and apprehension. Relief at having a medical advocate in Richard, someone who supported my right to fight for life. but apprehension about what Cassandra might do when she realized I was moving beyond her reach and influence. The war for my life was escalating, but for the first time since my diagnosis, I felt like I had allies who were fighting for me rather than against me. The question was whether it would be enough to protect me from a daughter who seemed increasingly desperate to ensure that my inconvenient survival came to an end. Sometimes family is the people who share your blood, but sometimes it's the people who fight to keep that blood flowing through your veins for as long as possible. The transformation didn't happen overnight, but over the weeks following Richard's intervention, I began to recognize a version of myself I hadn't seen in decades. The woman who had spent 30 years as a devoted nurse, making life and death decisions with confidence and clarity. The woman who had raised a child alone after losing her husband, managing grief and responsibility with equal determination. That woman had been buried under years of accommodating Cassandra's needs, but she was emerging stronger than ever. My transfer to the Millbrook Heights Medical Center marked the beginning of this metamorphosis. Richard's cardiac renal program was a revelation, state-of-the-art facilities, a multidisciplinary team approach, and most importantly, medical staff who treated me as a partner in my care rather than a passive recipient of their decisions. Dr. Sarah Chen, the program director and no relation to my previous financial advisor, spent 2 hours reviewing my complete medical history during our first consultation. Mrs. Pemberton, I see significant opportunities for improving both your cardiac function and your dialysis outcomes. Your previous doctors were competent, but they were working within the limitations of a smaller facility. She outlined a comprehensive treatment plan that included newer cardiac medications Richard had mentioned, modified dialysis protocols that would be easier on my heart, and a nutrition program specifically designed for patients with dual cardiac and renal failure. With this integrated approach, I'm optimistic we can extend your life expectancy well beyond the initial prognosis. How much beyond? I asked, hardly daring to hope. Potentially years rather than months. Some patients in similar situations have lived 5, even 10 years with good quality of life. The key is aggressive, coordinated treatment and strong support systems. The contrast with Dr. Mitchell's more conservative approach was stark, but I understood now that it wasn't about medical competence. It was about available resources and specialized expertise. Rosemere General had done their best with their capabilities, but Millbrook Heights offered possibilities that simply hadn't existed before. Mrs. Henderson had insisted on accompanying me to these appointments, taking meticulous notes and asking questions I wouldn't have thought to pose. What should we watch for in terms of warning signs? What lifestyle modifications would be most beneficial? How do we optimize Eleanor's nutrition within her medical restrictions? Her advocacy was invaluable, but more than that, her unwavering support was transforming my sense of self-worth. For years, I had measured my value through Cassandra's approval and appreciation. Now, I was learning to value myself through my own determination to fight for life and through the respect of people who genuinely cared about my well-being. The change was evident in small ways at first. I began asking more questions during medical appointments instead of passively accepting whatever doctors told me. I researched my conditions online, not to second-guess medical advice, but to become an informed participant in my care. I started making decisions based on what felt right for me rather than what would be most convenient for others. Richard noticed this transformation during one of our consultations. "Aunt Eleanor, you seem different, more assertive, more confident. It's wonderful to see. I feel like I'm remembering who I used to be," I admitted, before I became so focused on being the perfect mother that I lost track of being my own person. This newfound strength was tested when Cassandra discovered my transfer to Millbrook Heights. She arrived at the medical center unannounced, demanding to speak with Dr. Chen about my treatment plan. "I'm concerned that my mother is being oversold on aggressive treatments that may not be in her best interests," she told Dr. Chen during an impromptu meeting she had insisted upon. "She's elderly, she's been through a lot, and I worry that false hope is causing her to pursue futile interventions. Dr. Chen listened politely, then responded with professional directness. Mrs. Hartford, your mother is responding excellently to our treatment protocol. Her quality of life indicators are strong, her compliance is outstanding, and her prognosis has improved significantly since beginning our program. But realistically, how much longer can these treatments be effective, and at what cost? Mrs. Pemberton is competent to make her own medical decisions and to manage her own financial resources. Our obligation is to provide her with the best possible care for as long as she chooses to pursue it. Dr. Chen, I think you may not fully understand the family dynamics here. My mother has always been somewhat stubborn about accepting help or acknowledging limitations. She may not be thinking clearly about the burden her care places on others. I had been sitting quietly during this exchange, but Cassandra's characterization of me as incompetent and burdensome triggered something fierce in my chest. Cassandra, I said, my voice carrying an authority I hadn't used in years. I need you to stop speaking about me as if I'm not in the room. She turned to me with surprise, clearly not expecting direct confrontation. Mom, I'm just trying to help Dr. Chen understand the complete picture. The complete picture is that I'm a competent adult who has chosen to fight for my life using my own resources and with the support of medical professionals who respect my autonomy. Your opinion about my decisions is noted but irrelevant. Mom, you're being unreasonable. I'm your daughter and I love you. I just want what's best for you. If you love me, then support my choice to live as long as possible. If you want what's best for me, then respect my right to spend my own money on my own medical care. And if you can't do either of those things, then I need you to leave. The room fell silent. Dr. Chen maintained professional neutrality, but I could see approval in her expression. Mrs. Henderson smiled openly, her pride in my newfound assertiveness unmistakable. Cassandra's face cycled through shock, hurt, and anger before settling on something I'd never seen before. A kind of respect tinged with fear. For the first time in our relationship, I had drawn a firm boundary and enforced it without apology or accommodation. I see, she said finally. You've made your position very clear. I hope you're prepared for the consequences of these decisions. I'm prepared for the consequences of choosing life over death, yes. What I won't prepare for is choosing your financial convenience over my survival. After she left, Dr. Chen closed my file and looked at me with something approaching admiration. Mrs. Pemberton, in 30 years of practice, I've learned that patients who advocate strongly for themselves tend to have better outcomes than those who defer to family pressure. You're going to do very well in our program. The weeks that followed confirmed her prediction. My dialysis sessions became almost pleasant social occasions, as I developed friendships with other patients who were fighting similar battles. My energy levels improved with the new cardiac medications. Most importantly, my sense of purpose and self-worth grew stronger each day. I began volunteering with the hospital's patient advocacy program, helping other elderly patients navigate family pressures and medical decisions. My experience with Cassandra had taught me to recognize the signs of financial abuse and emotional manipulation that many families impose on sick relatives. The most important thing, I would tell newly diagnosed patients, is remembering that your life belongs to you, not to your family members. You have the right to fight for as much time as possible, regardless of what anyone else thinks about the cost or inconvenience. Mrs. Henderson often accompanied me to these volunteer sessions, and together we developed an informal support network for patients dealing with resistant family members. Eleanor's transformation has been remarkable, she told one patient's concerned friend. 6 months ago, she was allowing her daughter to steal from her and pressure her to die. Now she's helping other people fight for their lives. The irony wasn't lost on me. Cassandra's betrayal and financial exploitation had ultimately freed me from a lifetime of seeking her approval. Her attempts to control my death had taught me to value my own life. Her selfishness had forced me to develop the strength to advocate for myself. One evening, as I sat in my new apartment near the medical center, I had sold the Maple Ridge house on my own terms, using the proceeds to fund my medical care and secure my independence. I reflected on this unexpected gift that cancer had given me. Not the disease itself, which was still serious and required ongoing treatment, but the clarity it had provided about what really mattered. I was 72 years old, fighting kidney and heart failure, dependent on dialysis 3 times a week. I should have been diminished, defeated, grateful for whatever time remained. Instead, I felt more powerful than I had in decades. I had learned to choose life over convenience, truth over harmony, self-respect over family approval. The woman, who had once measured her worth through her daughter's success, had discovered her own value through her daughter's betrayal. Sometimes the greatest gifts come disguised as the most devastating losses, and sometimes finding yourself requires losing everything you thought defined you. Tomorrow would bring another dialysis session, another day of fighting for life, another opportunity to choose courage over comfort. And for the first time in years, I was genuinely excited to see what kind of woman I might become next. 6 months after that devastating diagnosis, I stood in my new apartment's kitchen, preparing dinner for an unlikely gathering of friends. The irony wasn't lost on me. The woman who had once lived for Sunday dinners with ungrateful family was now hosting Thursday evening meals for people who genuinely appreciated my cooking and my company. Mrs. Henderson arrived first, carrying a bouquet of roses from the garden she now tended at my old house. She had purchased the Maple Ridge property when I decided to sell, ensuring it remained in caring hands while providing me with the capital I needed for my ongoing medical expenses. "How are you feeling today?" she asked, the question she posed before every gathering. Not out of morbid curiosity, but from genuine concern and the kind of attentiveness that had become precious to me. "Strong," I replied, and meant it. The cardiac medications Dr. Chen had prescribed were working better than anyone had expected. My dialysis treatments had become routine rather than ordeal. Most importantly, I had stopped measuring my health against some imaginary timeline of decline and started celebrating each day of vitality I gained. Richard arrived next, bringing his wife Margaret, whom I'd grown to love like the daughter I'd always hoped to have. Margaret was a retired teacher who shared my passion for mystery novels and had become my partner in the patient advocacy program at Millbrook Heights. "Any word from Cassandra this week?" Richard asked as he hung up his coat. It had become a routine question, not because anyone hoped for contact, but because we all remained vigilant about potential interference. "Nothing since the court settlement," I reported. "Victoria says the restraining order and the threat of additional criminal charges seem to have convinced her that harassment won't be profitable." The legal resolution had taken 4 months, but Victoria Ashford had been relentless in pursuing both the return of my stolen funds and protection from future exploitation. Cassandra had ultimately agreed to repay the $135,000 she had taken, plus interest and legal fees, in exchange for avoiding criminal fraud charges. More importantly, she had been legally barred from contacting me about medical decisions or inheritance matters. "She sent a card last week," I continued. "One of those generic thinking of you cards with no personal message. I think it was her way of maintaining some appearance of family concern without actually having to invest any emotion." Patricia Vance, my former home health aide who had become a genuine friend, arrived with her husband Tom, followed by Sandra from the dialysis unit and her wife Lisa. This gathering represented something I had never experienced before: a chosen family based on mutual respect rather than biological obligation. As we settled around my dining table, sharing the roast chicken and vegetables I had prepared, my energy levels now allowed me to cook full meals again, the conversation naturally turned to the developments of the past months, not dwelling on past trauma, but celebrating the unexpected gifts that had emerged from crisis. "Eleanor, tell them about the letter from your granddaughter," Mrs. Henderson prompted, knowing this was news I was eager to share. I retrieved the envelope from my kitchen counter, still amazed by its contents. Sophia wrote to me last week. She's 18 now, heading to college in the fall, and she asked if we could meet for coffee sometime. The letter had been brief but significant. Grandma, I've been thinking about you a lot lately. Mom doesn't like to talk about your illness or your treatments, but I found some things online about dialysis and heart failure, and I realized how hard you must be fighting to stay alive. I would really like to see you if you're willing. I miss our conversations and I want to understand what really happened between you and Mom. Are you going to see her? Margaret asked. I already did. Yesterday afternoon, at that little cafe near the university campus. She's become quite a remarkable young woman, thoughtful, independent, asking hard questions about family dynamics and personal integrity. The conversation with Sophia had been both heartbreaking and healing. She had listened without judgment. As I explained the financial exploitation, the pressure to refuse treatment, the discovery that her mother valued inheritance over her grandmother's life. But more importantly, Sophia had shared her own observations about family patterns she had been questioning. She told me she had always wondered why her mother became so agitated whenever I mentioned my medical treatments, I continued. And she had noticed Cassandra's obsession with discussing inheritance matters even before I got sick. Sophia is smart enough to recognize manipulation when she sees it. What about Lucas? Richard asked. Any contact from your grandson? I shook my head sadly. He's only 16, still living at home, and completely dependent on Cassandra's version of events. Sophia says her mother has convinced him that I'm mentally unstable and that my medical treatments are a form of attention-seeking behavior. Perhaps when he's older and has more independence, he'll be curious enough to seek the truth. The loss of my relationship with Lucas remained painful, but I had learned to focus on what I could control rather than grieving for what was beyond my influence. Sophia's courage in reaching out, despite family pressure, gave me hope that truth had a way of emerging, even in the most carefully constructed narratives of deception. Speaking of truth, Patricia said, how did the television interview go last week? I smiled, still somewhat amazed by the unexpected direction my life had taken. A local news station had contacted me after hearing about my patient advocacy work, wanting to feature a story about elderly patients fighting family pressure to refuse medical treatment. The segment had aired 3 days ago, generating dozens of calls from viewers facing similar situations. Better than I expected, I replied. The reporter, Jessica Martinez, was excellent. She focused on the legal and medical aspects rather than the family drama, which made the story more educational than sensational. The interview had been my first public acknowledgement of what I'd experienced, but framing it as advocacy rather than personal grievance had felt empowering rather than exploitative. I had spoken about the importance of advance directives that truly reflect patient wishes, the warning signs of financial elder abuse, and the resources available for elderly patients who need protection from family pressure. 3 more patients contacted the advocacy program this week, Margaret added. All of them mentioned seeing your interview and recognizing similar patterns in their own families. As our dinner continued, I reflected on the strange path that had led me to this table, surrounded by people who celebrated my survival, rather than mourning my refusal to die conveniently. The woman who had once measured her worth through her daughter's approval now found validation through her ability to help other patients advocate for themselves. My phone buzzed with a text message, and I glanced at it, expecting routine communication from the medical center. Instead, I found a message from an unknown number. Mrs. Pemberton, my name is David Hartford. I'm James's brother. I saw your interview on the news and I think we need to talk. I've been concerned about some things I've observed regarding Cassandra's behavior, and I have information you might find useful. Would you be willing to meet for coffee sometime? I showed the message to the table, watching as my chosen family processed this unexpected development. David Hartford. I remembered him vaguely from a few family gatherings, a quiet man who worked in accounting and seemed to observe more than he spoke. Interesting, Richard mused. What kind of information do you think he might have? Given his relationship to the family and his professional background, Victoria's voice came from the speakerphone as I called her. I suspect he may have knowledge about James and Cassandra's financial situation that could be relevant to the exploitation case. As my friends discussed the potential implications of David's contact, I felt a familiar surge of strength and determination. Whatever new developments emerged, I was no longer the vulnerable woman who had once allowed family members to steal from her and pressure her toward death. I was someone who fought back, who protected herself, who helped others find their own courage. The cancer that was supposed to have killed me months ago remained under control. My kidney function had stabilized better than anyone had predicted. My heart, both literally and metaphorically, was stronger than it had been in years. And most importantly, I had learned to value my own life independently of anyone else's opinion about its worth. As we cleared the dinner dishes and prepared to part ways until next week's gathering, Mrs. Henderson squeezed my shoulder affectionately. Eleanor, I hope you realize how proud we all are of the woman you've become. I looked around the table at these remarkable people who had chosen to love and support me, and felt gratitude so profound it almost overwhelmed me. I couldn't have become her without all of you believing she was possible. Later that evening, alone in my apartment with medical equipment humming quietly in the background, I composed a response to David Hartford's message. Whatever information he possessed, whatever new challenges might emerge, I was ready to face them with the strength I had discovered through betrayal and the wisdom I had gained through survival. My daughter had tried to pull my plug, believing my death would solve her financial problems. Instead, she had pulled the plug on my old life of accommodation and self-denial, allowing a stronger, more authentic version of myself to emerge. Sometimes the most devastating betrayals become the foundations for our greatest transformations. Tomorrow would bring another dialysis session, another day of fighting for life, another opportunity to help someone else discover their own strength. And for the first time in my 72 years, I was exactly where I wanted to be, surrounded by people who valued me for who I was rather than what I could provide. The best revenge, I had learned, wasn't hurting the people who had wronged me. It was living fully, despite their attempts to diminish me, and using the strength gained through surviving their betrayal to help others find their own courage to choose life over convenience, truth over harmony, and self-respect over family. Approval. Sometimes pulling the plug on one life allows an entirely new and better life to begin. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.